Good morning. Welcome to the Housing Digital Micro Conference on regulation making the grade. My name's Joe Brune. I'm the Managing Director of Housing Digital and also today's host for the micro conference. We are looking to uncover under a 2-hour session some of the ways regulation is toughening up with the Ombudsman piling on the pressure, new powers for the regulator of social housing coming into effect next year. So is the sector ready to face the new regime? What are organisations doing to ensure that they meet the standards required? What are the roles played by technology, culture, training, policy, regulation itself in delivering good services, continuous improvement and high performance? I'd like to introduce our first keynote this morning, Selina White. Selina is the CEO of Magna Housing, and Selina's going to provide a really informative overview of the regulations and Magna's approach to them. Selina, you are free to begin your presentation and share your screen.
Thanks, Joe. So I'm going to spend about 10 minutes just talking to you about Magna's experience as part of the pilot regime, which was this time last year, actually. So Magna is a medium-sized housing organisation. We're based in the southwest. And what I'm going to talk to you today about really is the process that we went through, how we prepared, or as you'll see, didn't prepare for our inspection process, where the regulator focused as part of that inspection, being honest with you about what we felt went well, and being even more honest about areas that we feel that we could have done better and learnt from, and finally looking at the outcome that we received, plus the feedback that we had from the regulatory team, but also the feedback we were able to provide to them to shape their approach. And I think it is really important to say that, so this was the pilot programme. It was designed for them to test their approach to the new consumer standard inspections that then ultimately became part of the new inspection regime that's taken over from IDAs and actually came into force from April this year. So that programme is now live, and we are now, as registered providers of a certain size, all subject to that new regulation and inspection process. So just to cover off really quickly, it's just to say that this is very much around your governance structure when you're going through this type of inspection. And for us, we've got a fairly standard governance structure, nothing here that people wouldn't expect. We've got a strategic board. I sit on that. I head up an executive board. We've got a group of subcommittees that support the board in their work. And we've got a wider leadership team that support the executive board in what we do. So nothing new there, nothing unusual that tripped us up around our approach and structure around governance. So I want to spend a little bit of time actually on this slide, which takes us through the timetable that we followed during that inspection process. And as you can see, if you go sort of bottom left up to top right, we were in this inspection process just short of 6 months, actually, which felt a lot longer than we'd had previously under the IDA regime. And I think it's interesting to note that when we got the notification in April that our IDA, or sorry, our inspection was due, no, it wasn't IDA then actually, we were surprised because 4th of April was pretty much 3 years to the day that we got the outcome of our previous IDA. And I think it's a point worth making that we had believed that we were probably on a 4-year cycle, and ours came round in just over 3. So in terms of preparation, that's probably one to note. It also took another month from them for us to receive the scope of the inspection and for the documentary request from the regulator, which was fascinating because that was actually a little less than 2 weeks before they came in to observe our first board meeting. So my message to you is we had very little time to prepare. So you can't start too early, but also I think there's a benefit for the regulator seeing you as you are as an organisation and getting a fair assessment of where you are. So the regulatory team that came in, much larger than that you would have experienced under a historic IDA, so 6 strong. And that's because there were specific representations from a regulatory team around consumer inspection specifically, and a project manager that was working to coordinate. And our inspection was completely virtual, 100% virtual. There was no on-site work whatsoever. So what really worked for us, given what I said about lack of preparation time, was that we actually spread this out as much as possible. We got massive involvement from our heads of service, from our governance team. We went very much into collaborating with other organisations that had been through the pilot just prior to us to learn more from their experience. We did a limited amount of board member briefings. We did a little bit of sort of a little pack to help them, but no more than 4 sides of A4, I would say. The important thing for the board, the messaging was that they had to re-familiarise themselves or familiarise themselves with the key decisions that the board had taken since the last inspection, and making sure that they understood what was behind those decisions, where the evidence was, that they understood the risks associated with them. So that was really how we sort of prepared the board for it. But I have to say they performed incredibly well under those inspection conditions. We made use of technology certainly in terms of coordinating the evidence gathering for the regulator, and we used a lot of shared files and shared documents to be able to work on them collectively at the same time. Most importantly, as a senior team, we completely cleared diaries, and that included giving up annual leave that wasn't essential during the period, not across the whole 6 months, I will say, but certainly in the lead up to the interviews and the observed meetings. So the methodology that was used, well, this far left is traditional. It's what you would have expected under the old IDA system that really focuses on the governance and viability, but this time very much focused from the consumer side of things on service outcomes, transparency and accountability. But what was ever present in the discussions we had was the triangulation between all 3 elements, and this absolutely included the new consumer elements of this. So the regulator works very hard to ensure that what you're providing by way of documentary evidence, what you're saying as part of the interviews, and what they observe as part of the board and committee meetings absolutely triangulates against the governance elements, your viability elements, but also your consumer elements. So it's making sure that the read across between all of those is consistent, and that you've got that scrutiny and integrity of your sort of data and your numbers. I'm just going to whiz through this one because there's quite a lot on here. I think we are probably sharing slides at some point, but if you want any more information, absolutely happy to provide this. This sort of came out of the scoping, and this is really around the consumer side of things, the consumer inspection side of things. So service outcomes, a lot around stock, quality, health and safety, maintenance of shared spaces, antisocial behaviour, domestic abuse and tenancy elements. Coming into transparency and accountability, looking at diversity of need came up an awful lot, and how much data and evidence you have about your customers' vulnerabilities. Very much focused on tenant engagement, so a lot of questioning about how you approach that, and around complaints handling. So yeah, so just before sort of moving on from that, so I say a lot of this was all about the evidence gathering and the documents that we provided. It started off as a very low level number of documents that we were asked to provide, much less than previously on the IDA side of things, but it grew through the process. It absolutely grew, and in the end I think we provided more than we had previously under an IDA across the whole 5 months. Just running through quickly as well, areas where they drilled down into, and now this is, I think this is situational. It's very much targeted at your organisation, what your risk profile looks like. It's less general, I would say, but I think it's also contextual in terms of where the sector are at a given time. But the drill down areas for us, definitely around decency, quality of home, damp and mould, Focus on customer satisfaction, definitely driven through your repair service, a lot of scrutiny on that. But again, coming back to this data around your customer vulnerabilities, whether you know your customer well enough. Compliance, heavy discussion on compliance, fire risks, electrical testing, and then into ASB and complaints handling, and interestingly, quite a focus on what's going on around ombudsman determinations. Interestingly as well, professionalisation came up more than I expected it to. Whether it will now, I think so, but probably want to just look out for. But again, tenant scrutiny, customer engagement, spent an awful lot of time both at board level with the executive around customer engagement. Before I move on to that, just a very quick story around that. And I think it's about being open and honest and transparent with the regulator. We didn't always get it right. We had some data integrity problems where they pulled out a number that didn't look right. We questioned it, they questioned it, and it turned out they were correct. But, you know, we admitted that, we understood why we'd got it wrong, and they were very happy for that to play out as part of the inspection. We also, when we came to do tenant scrutiny, and part of that was them wanting to observe a customer panel, it didn't go well. It was supposed to be 5 customers. The regulator sent the whole 6 members of their inspection team onto that panel. By the morning of the panel, 4 out of 5 of our customers had either dropped out or couldn't connect due to technical issues. So we ended up with a scrutiny panel of 1 customer, 1 head of service, 1 director and 6 regulators. So you'll see that actually when we get into the feedback session, tenant scrutiny is something that they have asked us to look at. However, having said that, we are starting to move how we do tenant scrutiny, because although less than ideal, it is quite common for us to have this level of dropout rate when we try to do the panel approach to scrutiny. So we are adapting and doing lots of new channels around how we get tenant scrutiny going now. On the positive side, lots of evidence of the changes we're making to landlord services since the last inspection, and good outcomes against targets on performance, and where that's weaker, just providing the evidence of plans that are in place to address them. And I come back again, a real sort of focus on diversity data and how well informed you are about the customers that you are renting homes to. So to sum up, we were delighted to retain our G1 V1 rating. We weren't allowed to publicly say where our indicative rating came out on the consumer inspections, but it's fair to say that myself and the board were delighted with the outcome. Can't say any more than that. And that's it for me. Happy to take any questions.
Excellent. Thank you,
Stop
Selina.
sharing.
A quick question. Would you say overall that this new approach to inspecting you for the new regulation, is it positive? Is it beneficial? Does it help you, do you think, improve as a landlord? And do you think the sector has missed out from a lack of this in recent years?
Yes, I would, resounding yes, in terms of I think it's an improved approach to regulation. Now, that said, not a lot's changed on the economic elements of regulation. So they are still very, very tight in terms of your governance and your viability elements. So all the stuff that you know have been doing for many years, you will still come under the same level of scrutiny around and interrogation around that. The approach to consumer regulation seemed really balanced and fair, and the regulator recognised that it's still early days for them and us, actually, and it did feel that at times that we were muddling through it together, and that they were trying to hone and fine-tune their approach to this. So I'm hoping that, I mean, given that this was last year, I'm hoping that those that are experiencing the actual inspections now are getting the benefit of that. But it is very much about from a board perspective, it's very much about making sure that your board is aware of what you are doing and they know where to find the evidence around that, and that they are coming up with the right questions, rather than it being about knowing, because they do go into quite a lot of detail, but not with the board. The detail really came around with the directors at executive level.
Excellent, Selina, thank you. Have we got any more questions for Selina, please?
Hi everybody, I'm Julie Flynn. I'm from Grand Union Housing Group. Good to hear your experiences there, Selina, so thank you. You alluded to the fact that you might be changing the way you look at customer scrutiny, tenant scrutiny, and I just wondered if you could say a little bit more around that. I think we've probably hit a similar point where we know we're probably not invested in that element of our customer engagement enough, but we're not sure of the way forward, really.
Yeah, I think it's a really, I think this is understanding the profile of your customer and understanding why it is that certainly the traditional method of in-person panels that generally attracted the same kind of demographic, the same profile of customer, because of their availability and willingness to participate, and how limited that is in terms of really understanding. I mean, we've got 20,000 customers, and to get 5 people from the same demographic in a room around a table is not really representative. So we've really shifting to a more digital model. That's not to say we're getting rid of the panels. The panels still have their moments, they still have their value, but actually what we're doing now is going out more on the digital aspects, digital channels, and we are reaching far more. We're probably reaching around 4,000 customers that way, and we have over 2,000 regularly engaged customers now, which you can see by very nature we are getting a much more representative view of customer feedback and customer perspective on things, rather than, as I say, those traditional methods. So I don't think it's about replacing, and I don't think it's about getting rid of or kicking out that does work. I think it's expanding on it and giving as many options available as you can.
Excellent. Thank you for your question, Julie. And have we got any more questions for Selina, please?
I'm Laura Pearson-Wright. I'm the Head of Consumer Standards and Onboarding for Notting Hill Genesis. We're mid-IDA at the moment. And one of the things that I think is becoming really clear is that change in expectation of what the board know about quite granular detail on some of that consumer standards. And so I wondered if that had any impact on the changes that you make to your own board reporting in terms of that renewed focus.
The honest answer to that is no. And my perspective here is, and I always start from this, and I spoke to Fiona McGregor about it last week, actually, she's, is that the regulator isn't here to tell you how to run your business, no more than it's here to tell your board what to do. It's up to your board to determine what scrutiny means for your organisation and how they get the right level of assurance as a board in terms of what's happening in your organisation. So when this comes up in the inspection, what we did really, really well, I was very proud of the board, and especially the chair of our board did really, really well, was to manage that expectation. And actually, when there was a push at times to get into a bit more granular detail, it is for your board to stand their ground and explain to the regulator why we do the things that we do and the way that we do them, and to the level of scrutiny that we do them. Clearly, what is the role of the strategic board? What is the role of the supporting committees? And importantly, what is then fully delegated to the executive in terms of running the business on a day-to-day basis? And I think that narrative and that confidence in having that conversation with the regulator is really, really important. So, yeah, no, we haven't really gone into much more detail. We definitely don't do detailed board reporting. We are moving more towards sort of dashboard reporting, where board can engage when they want to into more level of detail. But I think we did a good account of ourselves in that respect.
Thank you for your question, Laura. We do have time for one more question. Jane Field, if you want to introduce yourself.
Jane Field from ACES Group, project manager within the IT team. Hi, Selina.
Hi, Jane.
Thanks for that presentation. It's just a quick question, picking up on how you've increased your engagement with customers via digital. Do you mind me asking, have you sort of procured a digital platform specifically for that?
No, no, we haven't actually. We're very simple. What we find is kind of fairly simple, stupid. I mean, we generally use, you know, most of the tools that we would normally have to hand, most organisations would have. So that might be through email, it might be through text messaging, etc. We do have portals, you know, there are portals that we use, so it's difficult to say one size fits all. But no, we haven't invested in any at this point. We haven't invested in any snazzy software to do that. We've actually, because actually what we wanted to do is use tried and tested methods that customers are really confident to use themselves, rather than to introduce yet another thing to log on to get the same results. So yeah, that's the approach we've taken.
Thank you for your question, Jane. Thank you, Selina, for a very informative presentation. So thank you to our 4 keynote speakers today. First of all, we heard from Selina White, the Chief Executive of Magna, who provided a good overview of Magna's experience of the regulator's inspection process. They had little time to prepare, so advise that you can never start too early. But it's beneficial for the regulator as they get to see you as you are. Overall, it was a positive experience and provided the team with key insights. You can't rely on the information given, said Leanne from BTP Architects. You have to check it. The industry, including the regulator, is still finding its feet with the regulatory environment, but she ran through what her practice is doing to keep on top of the new requirements. It includes things like materials tracker, providing a golden thread of information on everything that has gone into the building. Collaboration is, of course, critical, and compliance is everybody's responsibility. We then heard from Josh Davis, the head of operations at Chirpy Heating, who explained about the coming changes to regulation of heat networks. Some 66% of networks are in the social housing sector. There's a lot of work to be done to comply with the coming new regulatory regime, but he talked through what providers can do to ensure they meet the new rules. And then finally, of course, we had Stephen Repton, founder and CEO of Flowlio, who offers some practical guidance on establishing systems to manage projects in a way that minimizes the risk of failure. A new approach is a simple approach involving a collaborative framework with, of course, accountability. So just like to say thank you to our 4 presenters. Thank you for everyone who attended. I also want to use this opportunity to do a shameless pitch for our event in February, which is the Housing Innovation Show, which takes place at the ICC, the International Convention Centre in Birmingham on the 12th and 13th of February. We're expecting 1,000+ delegates over 5 stages, showcase of innovation and transformation. It's free to attend to housing professionals. So all about emerging disruptors. We've got live demos, such as a live AI build, really interesting stuff, a live cyber hack, where someone in the audience gets hacked live on stage, scary stuff. Hopefully it won't be you. And we've got lots of out-of-sector innovators. Please feel free to register for that, 12th and 13th of February at the ICC in Birmingham. So finally, big thank you to everyone today for attending and for speaking, and hope to see you for our next micro conference. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday afternoon.